Hello, Assalamu alaikum. How are you, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. And first of all, thank you very much for all that appreciation and thanking over the YouTube and in my inbox. And believe me, this is your love and support that keeps me going, that supports me to make more videos. Okay, so today we are going to discuss 10 important novels, rather I would say the most important novels in the English literature, and we will be starting with my most favorite writer, George Orwell, whose Animal Farm I just love. So we will be starting with 1984 by George Orwell. So full title of the novel is 1984, author George Orwell. So George Orwell was his pen name and his real name was Eric Arthur Blair. Type of work, it's a novel, genre dystopian fiction or science fiction, so keep it in mind, this is very important. Language, obviously English. Time and place written, it was in England, 1949. So you have to remember that this was a kind of anticipation what's going to happen in 1984. Date of first publication 1949. Publishers Harcourt Brace Jovanovich. Narrator, the third person limited. Protagonist, Winston Smith. Antagonist, the party and the big brother. Climax, Winston's torture with the cage of rats in room 101. Setting by time, 1984. Setting by place, London, England. The tone of George Orwell's 1984 is dark and frustrated and pessimistic. Tense, it's in past tense, and the themes are the psychological, technological, physical and social dangers of totalitarianism. You have to remember the definition of totalitarianism as well, and political authority, the importance of language in shaping human thought. Motifs, urban decay, London is falling apart under the party's leadership, the idea of double think, the ability to hold two contradictory ideas in one's mind at the same time and believe them both to be true. Symbols, the glass paperweight, Winston's desire to connect with the past, the red-armed prole, women, the hope that the proles will ultimately rise up against the party because it was written in the background of politics, the picture of St. Clement's Church that symbolizes the past. And the tally screens and the posters of Big Brother, the party's constant surveillance of its subjects. The phrase, the place where there is no darkness, Winston's tendency to mask his fatalism with false hope, as the place where there is no darkness turns out to be not a paradise but a prison cell. This was 1984, and we are moving to The Animal Farm by the same writer, George Orwell or Eric Blair. And Animal Farm is undoubtedly a great masterpiece. If you haven't read it yet, go read it. It's an amazing novella. The full title of the novella is Animal Farm, a fairy story. Author George Orwell or Eric Arthur Blair. Type of work, it's a novella. Remember that novella is shorter than a novel. It's not that bigger. Genre dystopian, animal fable or satire or allegory or political romance. Language English. Time and place written 1943 to 1944. So in between 1 year in London again. Date of first publication 1946. Publishers Harcourt Brace and Company. Narrator, Animal Farm is the only work by Orwell in which the author does not appear conspicuously as a narrator or major character. It is the least overtly personal of all his writings, and maybe the most interesting as well. The anonymous narrator of the story is almost a nonentity, notable for no individual idiosyncrasies or biases. Point of view, the story is told from the point of view of the common animals of Animal Farm, though it refers to them in the third person plural as they. Protagonist, there is no particular clear central character in the novel, but Napoleon, the dictatorial pig, is the figure who drives and ties together most of the action. Rising action, the animals throw off their human oppressors and establish a socialist state called Animal Farm. You remember the French Revolution? If you don't, go read it again. The pigs, being the most intelligent intelligent animals in the group take control of the planning and government of the farm. Snowball and Napoleon engage in ideological disputes and compete for power. Climax: in chapter 5, Napoleon runs Snowball off the farm with his trained pack of dogs and declares that the power to make decisions for the farm will be exercised solely by the pigs. Following action, Squealer emerges to justify Napoleon's actions with skillful but duplicitous reinterpretations of animalist principles. Napoleon continues to consolidate his power, eliminating his enemies and reinforcing his status as a supreme leader. The common animals continue to obey the pigs, hoping for a better future. वो कभी आता है कि नहीं आता है, they don't know that. Setting by time, it's 1895. Setting by place, as is the case with most fables, there is no particular setting by place in the fables. An animal farm is set in an unspecified time period and is largely free from historical references that would allow the reader to date the action precisely. It is fair to assume, however, that Orwell means the fable to be contemporaneous with the object of its satire, the Russian Revolution, 1917 to 1945. The tone of Animal Farm, for the most part, the tone of their novel is objective, stating external facts and rarely digressing into philosophical meditations. The mixture of this tone with the outrageous trajectory of the plot, however, steeps the story in an over-mounting irony. The tense of the novel is past themes, the corruption of socialist ideals in the Soviet Union, the societal tendency toward class stratification, the danger of a naive working class, the abuse of language as instrumental to the abuse of power. The foreshadowing in Animal Farm, the pigs' eventual abuse of power is foreshadowed at several points in the novel. At the end of chapter 2, immediately after the establishment of a supposedly egalitarian animal farm, the extra milk taken from the cows disappears, and the text implies that Napoleon has drunk it himself. Similarly, the dog's attack on the boxer during Napoleon's purges in chapter 7 foreshadows the pig's eventual betrayal of the loyal cart horse. Motifs: songs, state, rituals. The symbols in Animal Farm are Animal Farm itself, the barn, and the windmill. The windmill is an amazing symbol there. And we are moving to The Brave New World, a title taken from The Darling Shakespeare by Aldous Huxley. The full title is Brave New World. Author Aldous Huxley, type of work, it's a novel again because we are talking about novels. Genre: utopian novel, dystopian novel, or science fiction. Language: English. Time and place: written 1931, England. Date of first publication 1932. Publishers Chatto and Windus in London. Narrator: the third person omniscient. The narrator frequently makes passages of objective description sound like speech or thought patterns of a particular character, using a technique usually called free indirect quotation. Point of view: narrated in the third person, primarily from the point of view of Bernard or John, but also from the point of view of Lenina and Mustafa Mont. Protagonists: Bernard, Marx, Helmholtz, Watson, and John. Antagonist: Mustafa Mont. Foreshadowing: the director's memories of his trip to the reservation foreshadow his relationship to John and Linda, and Bernard's insecurities and dissatisfactions foreshadow his exile. John's longing to sacrifice himself foreshadow his suicide. Climax: John incites a riot in the hospital in chapter 15. Falling action happens in chapter 18, in which John isolates himself in a lighthouse and punishes himself. It ends with an orgy and his suicide. Setting by time: 2540 AD, referred to in the novel as 632 years after Ford, meaning that 632 years after the production of the first Model T car. Setting by place, England, savage preservation in New Mexico. Tone, initially sardonic and detached, later despairing and sympathetic. Tense, it's written in the past tense. Themes, the use of technology to control society, the incompatibility of happiness and truth, the dangers of an all-powerful state. Motifs, alienation, sex, and Shakespeare. Symbols. The drug soma is a symbol of the use of instant gratification to control the world state's populace. And it is also a symbol of the powerful influence of science and technology on the society in the modern age. So this was Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and we are moving to The Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Remember Charles Dickens. There are people who say Charles Dickens. It's wrong. Full title of the novel is Great Expectations. Author Charles Dickens. Type of work, novel. Genre, social criticism and autobiographical fiction. Remember this. Language in English. Time and place written 1860 to 1861, almost 1 year in London. First publication published serially in England from December 1860 to August 1861. So remember that in serials in some newspaper. Published in book form in England and America in 1862. Publishers Chapman and Hall in the United Kingdom and Harper and Brothers in the United States of America. Narrator Pip, the main character. Protagonist, again it's Pip. Antagonist, Great Expectations does not contain a traditional single antagonist. Various characters serve as figures against whom Pip must struggle at various times. Magwitch, Mrs. Jock, Mrs. Havisham, Estella, Ulrich, Bentley, Drummel, and Compeyson. With the exception of the last three, each of the novel's antagonists is redeemed before the end of the book. Point of view, the first person's point of view. Setting by time, mid-19th century. Setting by place, Kent and London, the two different cities. Tone, comic and cheerful, satirical, critical, sentimental, dark, dramatic, foreboding, gothic, and sympathetic. So there are many tones in this novel. Tense, it's written in the past tense. Themes, ambition and the desire for self-improvement, criminality and innocence, maturation and the growth from childhood to adulthood, the importance of affection, loyalty and sympathy over social advancement and class superiority, social class. The important motifs in The Great Expectations: crime and criminality, disappointment, expectations, the connection between weather or atmosphere and dramatic events, doubles, two convicts, two secret benefactors, two invalids. There are many twos here. And now we talk about the symbols in Great Expectations. The stopped clocks at Satis house symbolize Miss Havisham's attempt to stop time. The many objects relating to crime and guilt: gallows, prisons, handcuffs, policemen, lawyers, courts, convicts, chains, files, all that stuff, symbolize the theme of guilt and innocence. Satis house represents the upper class world to which Pip longs to belong. Bentley Drummel represents the grotesque caprice of the upper class. Joe represents the conscience, affection, loyalty, and simple good nature. The marsh mists represent the danger and ambiguity. This was Great Expectations, and our next novel is Gleavers Travels by Jonathan Swift. This is again an amazing piece of art. Full title: Gleavers Travels, or Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World by Lemuel Gleaver. Author Jonathan Swift. Type of work, it's a novel again. Genre, satire. It's total satire. Language, English. Time and place, written approximately 1712 to 1726, London and Dublin. Date of first publication 1726 or 1735, unbridged. Publishers George Faulkner, unbridged 1735. Narrator Lemuel Gleaver. Protagonist Lemuel Gleaver again. Point of view: Gleaver speaks in the first person. He describes other characters and actions as they appear to him. Major conflict. On the surface, Gleavers tries to understand the various societies with which he comes into contact and to have these societies understand his native England. Below the surface, Swift is engaged in conflict with the English society he is satirizing. Rising action. Gleavers' encounters with the other different societies eventually lead up to his rejection of human society in the fourth voyage. Climax happens when Gleaver rejects human society in the fourth voyage, specifically when he shuns the generous Don Pedro as a vulgar Yahoo. Falling action. Gleaver's unhappy return to England accentuates his alienation and compels him to buy horses which remind him of Hunnams to keep him company. Setting by time, early 18th century. Setting by place, primarily England and the imaginary countries of Lilliput, Blefuscu, Brobdingnag, Laputa and the land of Hunnams, or the land of the horses. Tone. Gleaver's tone is gullible and naive during the first three voyages. In the fourth, however, it turns cynical and bitter. The intention of the author, Jonathan Swift, is satirical and biting throughout. Tense. It was written in the past tense, as most novels are. Themes. Might versus right, the individual versus society, the limits of human understanding. Motifs. Excrement, because it appears again and again. Foreign languages and clothing. Symbols. Lilliputians symbolize different human beings. Brobdingnagians, Laputans, Hunnams, and England. And here ends Gleavers Travels, and we move to Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Full title of the novel is Heart of Darkness, author Joseph Conrad, a type of word novella. So remember that between a novel and short story in length and scope. So novella is shorter than a novel in length and scope both. Genre, symbolism, colonial literature, and adventure tale. Language, English. Time and place, written England in 1898 or 1899, inspired by Conrad's journey to the Congo in 1890. So remember that once Joseph Conrad went to Congo in 1890, and this journey began an inspiration to write this novella. First publication, serialized in Blackwood's magazine in 1899, published in the book form in 1902 in the volume Used, a narrative and two other stories. Publishers J.M. Dent and Sons Limited. Narrator. There are two narrators, okay, remember. An anonymous passenger on a pleasure ship who listens to Marlowe's story, and Marlowe himself, a middle-aged ship's captain. Point of view. The first narrator speaks in the first person plural on behalf of four other passengers who listen to Marlowe's tale. Marlowe narrates his story in the first person, describing only what he witnessed and experienced and providing his own commentary on the story. Protagonist, it's Marlowe. Major conflict. Both Marlowe and Kurtz confront a conflict between their images of themselves as civilized Europeans and the temptation to abandon morality completing once they leave the context of European society. Foreshadowing permeates every moment of the narrative, mostly operates on the level of imagery, which is consistently dark, gloomy, and threatening. Rising action. The brutality Marlowe witnesses in the company's employees, the rumors he hears that Kurtz is a remarkable and humane man, and the numerous examples of Europeans breaking down mentality or physically in the environment of Africa. So the climax of The Heart of Darkness is when Marlowe's discovery upon reaching the inner station that Kurtz has completely abandoned European morals and norms of behavior. Marlowe's acceptance of responsibility for Kurtz's legacy, Marlowe's encounters with company officials and Kurtz's family and friends, Marlowe's visit to Kurtz intended. Setting by time, later part of the 19th century, probably sometimes between 1876 and 1892. And setting by place, opens on the Thames River outside London, where Marlowe is telling the story that makes up The Heart of Darkness. Events of the story take place in Brussels, at the company's offices, and in the Congo, then Belgian territory. Its tone is ambivalent. Tense, it's in the past tense. Themes. Now, the hypocrisy of imperialism, madness as a result of imperialism, the absurdity of evil. These are the famous themes. Motifs: darkness, hyperbolic language, ironic understatement, interiors versus surface. Symbols: rivers, fog, women, French warship shelling, forested coast, grove of deaths. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was Heart of Darkness, and we are moving to The Lord of Flies by William Golding. Full title: Lord of Flies, author William Golding. Type of work: it's a novel again. Genre: allegory and dystopian fiction. Language: English. Time and place written: early 1950s, Salisbury, England. Date of first publication: 1954. Publishers: Faber and Faber. Narrator: the story is told by an anonymous third-person narrator who conveys the events of the novel without commenting on the action or intruding into the story. So he tells whatever he sees. He doesn't comment himself. Point of view: the narrator speaks in the third person, primarily focusing on Ralph's point of view, but following Jack and Simon in certain episodes. The narrator is omniscient and gives us access to the character's inner thoughts. Protagonist: it's Ralph. Major conflict: free from the rules that adult society formerly imposed on them, the children, the boys, marooned on the island, struggled with the conflicting human instincts that exist within each of them and within each of us. The instinct to work towards civilization and order, and the instinct to descend into savagery, violence, and chaos. Foreshadowing: Piggy's death is foreshadowed by his physical frailty and dependence on his glasses. Fire as a source of conflict is foreshadowed by the first fire the boys set on the island. The boys' eventual rescue is foreshadowed by references to civilization and Simon's prediction. Rising action of the Lord of Flies: the boys assemble on the beach in the election for leader. Ralph defeats Jack, who is furious when he loses. As the boys explore the island, tension grows between Jack, who is interested only in hunting, and Ralph, who believes most of the boys' efforts should go toward building shelters and maintaining a signal fire. Now, when rumors surface that there is some sort of beasting living in the island, the boys grow fearful, and group begins to divide into two camps, supporting Ralph and Jack, respectively. Ultimately, Jack forms a new tribe altogether, fully immersing himself the savagery of the hunt. Climax: Simon encounters the Lord of the Flies in the forest glade and realizes that the beast is not a physical entity but rather something that exists within each of the boys on the island. When Simon tries to approach the other boys and convey his message to them, they fall on him and kill him savagely. Oh my god. There is a movie on this, Lord of Flies. It's a worth watching movie. If you cannot read the novel, please watch the movie at least. And the falling action is virtually all the boys on the island abandon Ralph and Piggy and descend further into savagery and chaos. When the other boys kill Piggy and destroy the conch shell, Ralph flees from Jack's tribe and encounters a naval officer on the beach. Setting by time: near future. Setting by place: a deserted tropical island near England. Tone: there are 4 tones at different places: dark, violent, pessimistic, and tragic. Tense: immediate past tense. Themes: civilization versus savagery, the loss of innocence, and the innate human evil, an evil that is born with every human. Motifs: biblical parallels, natural beauty, the bullying of the weak by the strong, the outward trappings of savagery, face paint, spears, totems, chants. The important symbols: the conch shell, Piggy's glasses, the signal fire, the beast, the Lord of the Flies, Ralph, Piggy, Jack, Simon, and Roger. And we are turning to our 7th novel, Things Fall Apart. The full title is Things Fall Apart. Author is Chinua Achibe. इसको ध्यान से सुन लें. So you have to pronounce it like this. Chinua Achebe. Type of work, it's a novel. Genre, it's critique or tragedy. Language, English. Time and place written 1959, Nigeria. Date of first publication 1959 again. Publishers Heinemann Educational Books. Narrator, the narrator is anonymous but shows sympathy for the various residents of Umofia. Protagonist Okonkwo. And foreshadowing, the author's initial description of Ikmefeng as an ill-fated boy, which presages his eventual murder by Okonkwo. The arrival of the locusts, which symbolizes the eventual arrival of colonizers. Obiorika's suggestions that Okonkwo kill himself, which foretells Okonkwo's eventual suicide. Point of view of things fall apart. The narration is in the third person by an omniscient figure who focuses on Okonkwo but switches from character to detail thoughts and motives of various individuals. Following action, the villagers allow the white government's messengers to escape, and Okonkwo, realizing the weakness of his clan, commits suicide. Setting by time 1890s. Setting by place, two lower Nigerian villages. Tone ironic, tragic, satirical and fable-like. Tense, it's in the past tense. Themes, the struggle between tradition and change, varying interpretations of masculinity, language as a sign of cultural difference. Motifs, chi and animal imagery. Symbols, the novel is highly symbolic. Now, this is all about symbols. The whole novel is full of the symbols and it asks to be read in symbolic terms. Two of the main symbols are the locusts and fire. The locusts symbolize the white colonialists descending upon the Africans, seeming to augur good but actually pretending troublesome encounters. Fire epitomizes Okonkwo's nature. He is fierce and destructive. A third symbol, the drums, represents the physical connection of the community of clansmen in Umofia and acts as a metaphorical heartbeat that beats in unison, uniting all the village members. That's it for the Things Fall Apart, my favorite novel, and we are moving to Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. Full title is To the Lighthouse, author Virginia Woolf. Type of work, novel. Genre, stream of consciousness. Remember that this novel, To the Lighthouse, is an exemplary novel regarding the stream of consciousness term. Language, English. Time and place, 1926, London. Date of first publication, 1927. Publishers, Hogarth Press. Narrator, the narrator is anonymous. Point of view, the narrator speaks in the third person and describes the characters and actions subjectively, giving us insight into the character's feelings. The narrative switches constantly from the perceptions of one character to those of the next. Major conflict, the common struggle that each of the character faces is to bring the meaning and order to the chaos of life. Protagonist, although Mrs. Ramsay is the central focus of the beginning of The Lighthouse, the novel traces the development of Lily Briscoe to the end, making it more accurate to describe Lily as a protagonist. Foreshadowing, James' initial desire and anxiety surrounding the voyage to the lighthouse foreshadows the trip he makes a decade later. Rising action, James' desire to journey to the lighthouse, Mr. Ramsay's need to ask Mrs. Ramsay for sympathy, Charles Tansley's insistence that women cannot paint or write, Lily Briscoe's stalled attempt at her painting. Climax, Mrs. Ramsay's dinner party. Following action, Mrs. Ramsay's trip to the lighthouse with Cam and James, Lily Briscoe's completion of her painting. Setting by time, the year immediately preceding and following World War I. Setting by place, the Isle of Skye in the Hebrides, a group of islands, the west of Scotland. Tone, elegiac, poetic, rhythmic, imaginative. Tense, the past tense. Motifs, the differing behaviors of men and women, and brackets. Important themes, the transience of life and work, art as a means of preservation, the subjective nature of reality, the restorative effects of beauty. Lastly, the symbols. Lily's painting symbolizes for something, the Ramsey's house, the sea, the bear's skull, and the fruit basket. And ladies and gentlemen, we are moving to the last novel today, The Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. The full title, Wuthering Heights, author Emily Bronte, type of work, novel, genre, Gothic novel. Okay, remember what are the Gothic novels? Gothic novels are designed to both horrify and fascinate the readers with the scenes of passion and cruelty, supernatural elements, and a dark, foreboding atmosphere. Language, English, including bits of Yorkshire dialect. Time and place, written in 1846 or 1847. Emily Bronte wrote Wuthering Heights in the parsonage of the isolated village of Haworth in Yorkshire. Date of first publication 1847. Publishers Thomas C. Newby. Narrator Lockwood. Some parts of Nellie's story are narrated by other characters, such as when Nellie receives a letter from the Isabella and recites its contents. Point of view, most of the events of the novel are narrated in Nellie's voice, from Nellie's point of view, focusing only on what Nellie can see and hear, or what she can find out about indirectly. Nellie frequently comments on what the other characters think and feel and what their motivations are, but these comments are all based on her own interpretations of the other characters. She's not an omniscient narrator. Protagonist is Heathcliff, Catherine. Foreshadowing, Lockwood's initial visit to Wuthering Heights, in which the mysterious relationships and lurking resentments between the characters create an air of mystery. Lockwood's ghostly nightmare during the night he spends in Catherine's old bed prefigures many of the events of the rest of the novel. Rising action, Heathcliff's arrival at Wuthering Heights, Hindley's abusive treatment of Heathcliff, and Catherine's first visit to Thrushcross Grange set the major conflict in motion. Once Heathcliff hears Catherine say it would degrade her to marry him, the conversation between Nellie and Catherine, which he secretly overhears, drives him to run away and pursue his vengeance. Climax, Catherine's death in the culmination of the conflict between herself and Heathcliff, and removes any possibility that their conflict could be resolved positively. After Catherine's death, Heathcliff merely extends and deepens his drive toward revenge and cruelty. Falling action, Heathcliff destroys Isabella and drives her away, takes possession of young Linton, forces Catherine and Linton to marry, inherits Thrushcross Grange, then loses interest in the whole project and dies. Hareton and young Catherine are to be engaged to be married, promising an end to the cycle of revenge. Setting by time, the action of Nellie's story begins in the 1770s. Lockwood leaves Yorkshire in 1802. Setting by place, all the action of Wuthering Heights takes place in or around two neighbouring houses on the Yorkshire moors. Themes of Wuthering Heights, the destructiveness of a love that never changes, the precariousness of social class. Motifs, doubles, repetition, the conflict between nature and culture. Symbols, lastly, the moods, the ghosts. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. This is Hassan Akhtar Nisar speaking from his home. See you next time.